Hello and welcome to another episode of the Rogues Gallery, the playlist on my channel that explores the villains of a hero whilst exhibiting some of their most impressive artwork. Due to popular demand, I will finally be exploring the enemies of the Flash, so let's make a speedy start and take a look at our first villain who uses magic to battle outright velocity. After rebelling against the 64th century ruler of Earth, named the Chronarch, Citizen Abra was deemed a criminal and was banished to the planet's ancient past. Arriving in the 20th century, Abra utilized his futuristic technology to create a new identity and came to be known as Abracadabra. With his new persona, Kadabra committed spectacular crimes but was repeatedly thwarted by the Flash. Although the second Flash actually saved his life as he was about to be executed, Kadabra remains a constant threat to the Flash. We continue with our smoke and mirrors style of villains with our next rogue, who is aptly known as the Mirror Master. During his time in prison, Sam Scudder accidentally discovered how to create realistic holograms using only mirrors. With this newfound knowledge, Scudder performed an astonishing jailbreak before continuing to master his skills with other reflective devices. Now known as the Mirror Master, Scudder would often come into conflict with the Flash and even collaborated with Captain Cold to form the secret society of supervillains. Despite this, Scudder died during the crisis, however others such as Captain Boomerang and Evan McCulloch adopted his persona. Worse yet, when Evan joined the Suicide Squad, he was actually one of the rogues responsible for the demise of the fourth Flash, Bart Allen. Our next rogue to use tricks and illusions is the criminal known as the Trickster. The original Trickster was James Jesse, who despite having a fear of heights, fooled audiences into thinking he was an outstanding trapeze artist by secretly using his gravity-defying Airwalker shoes. His dishonest personality eventually led him to a life of crime until he eventually retired. Subsequently, problematic teenager Axel Walker became the second Trickster when the blacksmith required the skills of a trapeze artist for her criminal gang. Axel would be given a series of technological gadgets before being sent to attack Wally West as a test, where he impressed his new employer. Our next villain also uses gadgetry to make his opponents pay the price of crossing him. In an attempt to restore his hearing, Hartley Rathaway's family spent millions on scientific experiments. When his hearing was finally restored, he became obsessed with music and sound. Eventually, he would use his family's wealth to experiment with devices that manipulated sound to commit crimes. He would quickly become infamous as the Pied Piper and came into conflict with Barry Allen before his death. At this time, the openly gay Rathaway would fight a different battle against social injustice. Despite being a real brute, our next rogue also uses his scientific genius to battle his foes. He is of course Gorilla Grodd. Deep in the African jungle lies Gorilla City, home to a peaceful race of highly evolved and intelligent apes. The leader of these simians was King Solowar, however his throne was threatened by the power-hungry evil genius that was Gorilla Grodd. Grodd would control the mind of Solowar in an attempt to overthrow the king and lead an army to conquer Earth. In an attempt to stop Grodd's malevolent plans, Solowar enlisted the help of the Flash, who defeated the antagonistic ape and imprisoned him within Gorilla City. Our final villain in this section of the gallery predominantly uses his weaponized boomerangs as his preferred gadgets. He is the appropriately named Captain Boomerang. Sent to the US at an early age by his mother, Australian George Harkness eventually took a job demonstrating boomerangs to children for the Wiggins Game Company. His second job, however, was far less wholesome as he became a burglar by night. It was during one of his robberies that he first encountered the Flash, who he fought with his weaponized boomerangs. Eventually, Captain Boomerang served on the government-funded Suicide Squad but missed the thrill of stealing and ultimately reverted back to his criminal ways. This would perhaps be remiss as Captain Boomerang was shot dead by Robin's father during the Identity Crisis event. However, his son Owen Mercer would take the mantle of Captain Boomerang and rapidly follow in his father's footsteps as he realized that he could temporarily reach super speeds. We shall now race along to our next group of villains who all utilize meteorological methods of attack, so it is only fitting that we begin with the Weather Wizard. Common thief Mark Marden stole the weather wand from his dying brother and used it to control the weather. His ability to summon storms, lightning, and extreme weather conditions saw him become a professional criminal who adopted the name of Weather Wizard to battle the likes of the Flash. The Weather Wizard would team up with the Rogues to battle other versions of the Flash and even participated in the murder of Bart Allen, the fourth Flash. This horrific act would subsequently see him exiled to a prison planet. Since we are talking about the weather, we will now head into a real heatwave with our next rogue. After being locked in an industrial freezer during a school trip to a meatpacking plant, Mick Rory developed cryophobia. This led to his subsequent obsession with heat and fire, which ultimately resulted in him creating his own heat gun, which he used to commit crimes as Heatwave. Eventually, he became the enemy of the second Flash and even joined forces with his fellow Rogues Gallery member and villainous opposite Captain Cold. Despite this, he could still not defeat the Flash and eventually joined forces with his enemy until he later reverted back to his villainous ways. Since we mentioned him, now would be a perfect opportunity to take a look at Captain Cold. Leonard Snart sought solace from his abusive father by riding in his grandfather's ice truck. Years later, Snart became a career criminal and clashed with the Flash before developing a freeze gun to stop the speedster in his tracks. Snart would don a parka coat and goggles before adopting his new persona of Captain Cold. Despite being a professional criminal, Captain Cold does have an honor code which includes no senseless violence, no use of drugs, and no killing women or children. Additionally, after Barry Allen's death during the crisis, Captain Cold turned his back on crime for a period to become a licensed bounty hunter, but subsequently returned to crime when Wally West became the new Flash. We swiftly move on to our next villain, who is actually the sister of Captain Cold, the Golden Glider. This champion ice skater and sister of Captain Cold acquired her extraordinary spinning skills from Roscoe Dillon, aka the Top. However, when her mentor was killed, Lisa Snart vowed to make the Flash suffer. Lisa soon became the Golden Glider and utilised anti-gravity skates to try to assassinate the Flash's wife, Iris Allen. The Flash did battle with the Golden Glider on numerous occasions until she was killed by one of her own schemes when one of her Chillblaine creations flash froze her body, which subsequently shattered. Captain Cold would later take revenge for his sister's death by murdering the final Chillblaine. You might think it foolish to try to match speed with a speedster like the Flash, but our last group of villains have done exactly that. We will race towards the final part of the exhibition, and since we mentioned him, we will start with the Top. Roscoe Dillon's fascination with spinning objects eventually influenced his alias when he became a costume criminal. His ability to spin at incredibly high speeds saw him clash with the Flash on numerous occasions. However, Barry Allen's super speed vibrations caused the cell in the Top's brain to overheat. As a result, the Top died, however his spirit lived on as he possessed Barry Allen's father. Aside from the Barry Allen Flash, the Top has also clashed with Wally West. Another speed demon in this gallery ironically took a religious name to commit acts of evil. He is the one known as Savitar. This former Eastern Bloc military pilot was infused with Speed Force energy as he was flying an experimental supersonic plane. The resulting effects gave him astronomical super speed, self-healing, and force field projection, which he believed were gifts from God. This notion saw him take the alias of Savitar after the Hindu god of motion. However, his religious muse did not see him use his powers for good, and in contrast, he initiated a cruel campaign to eliminate other speedsters like Max Mercury and the Flash, who might challenge his abilities. The Wally West version of the Flash managed to defeat Savitar after pushing him into the Speed Force, where he was absorbed into an energy field. In keeping with the religiously named speedsters, we should move onwards and upwards with Godspeed. Former detective partner of Barry Allen, August Hart was the only person to witness Barry's accident that turned him into the Flash. Subsequently, Hart himself was struck by lightning during a Speed Force storm in Central City whilst pursuing the criminal organisation called the Black Hole. This event would see August become the ruthless vigilante known as Godspeed. Eventually, August and Barry would come into conflict whilst battling the Paradox. Unfortunately, Godspeed would be killed by the Reverse Flash. Speaking of which, let's use this time to take a more in-depth look at the Reverse Flash. Also known as Professor Zoom, Reverse Flash was said to be from the 25th century. He became obsessed with Barry Allen's Flash and even found one of his old costumes in a time capsule. The residual Speed Force energy left on the suit provided Thorne with the boost he needed to travel back to the 20th century and meet his hero. Unfortunately, Thorne arrived at a time after Allen's death and discovered that he would one day become the evil Reverse Flash in a museum. The shock of this revelation caused Thorne to despise the Flash, and he travelled back to his own time where he created his opposite version of the Zoom suit. Now known as Professor Zoom or the Reverse Flash, Thorne travelled back to the 20th century and murdered Iris Allen after failing to win her heart. A furious Barry Allen sent his nemesis into another dimension, however he would subsequently return to torment his new fiancée, Fiona Webb. Ultimately, the Flash would end the nightmare by snapping Thorne's neck. Our next version of the Flash may be the most sinister of all because he is the personification of death, the Black Flash. Although the existence of the Black Flash is unclear, Max Mercury is said to have seen this being. These rare sightings may be because speedsters are too fast for Death to capture them and therefore require the Black Flash to perish. In time, the Black Flash came to pull Wally West back to the Speed Force, but claimed Linda Park instead. When it returned for West, the Black Flash would freeze time for everyone but those who possessed a connection to the Speed Force. West only managed to defeat the Black Flash by racing it to the end of time, a point where death had no meaning and ultimately dissipated. Finally, we will end this tour of the villains of Flash with the final rogue on our list. After a series of tragedies turned his world upside down, Hunter Zolomon approached his friend Wally West to use the cosmic treadmill in order to reset his life. By travelling back in time, Zolomon hoped to prevent the events that led him to this point, which included his father's murder of his mother, his divorce, his firing from the FBI, and his broken back via a fight with Gorilla Grodd. Despite their friendship, West refused to change time for Zolomon, who took matters into his own hands. The resulting explosion from the cosmic treadmill cured Zolomon's paralysis and shifted him into a different frame of relative time, which allowed him to move at super speed by controlling time's passage. Hunter would use his newfound powers to don a new costume and adopt the name of Zoom to teach the Flash a lesson. He would attack West's family and caused his wife to miscarry. When the two speedsters fought, the Flash trapped Zoom in a repeating window of time. With the inclusion of Zoom, we can now end this special look at the enemies of the Flash. I hope that I did not exclude too many of your favourites, but if I did, then please feel free to list them in the comment section. If you enjoyed this episode of the Rogues Gallery, then let me know which other characters you would like me to explore in future uploads. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.